Buddy, my name is Tom. I'm an alcoholic and an addict.
Hi,
Uh,
Tom.
Sound check. Do I sound okay?
You sound
Everybody
great.
can hear me? Great, great. My name is Tom. I'm an alcoholic and an addict. I'll briefly qualify and tell you that my sobriety date is April 22nd of 2011. I am a very proud alumni of the Caron Foundation. Can't say enough good things about it. I mean, it's where the magic happened for me. Caron will always have a really special place in my heart for sure. Uh, and I was excited to be a part of the Step series. And when Christine asked me if I would share a little bit on Step 10, I was more than happy to do it. I want to thank everybody that's been a part of the Step series, all the presenters, people who've shared, people who've just sat in or whatever. It's been really great. And I'm really looking forward to Steps 11 and 12 coming up. So that should be fun. So I guess with that said, I'll talk a little bit about Step 10. A little bit of one more thing about me. I absolutely love recovery and I can really talk, but I'm going to commit to try to be as brief as possible. But I want to do the topic, of course, I want to do it justice. So I was told that we should start by reciting the steps. So let's do that, right? The 10th step is continue to take personal inventory, and when we are wrong, promptly admitted it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk a little bit about what the step means to me, and why it's so important, to me. And then talk a little bit about what the 10th step looks like in action for me, what it looked like early on and where I'm at now. And then I get the fun part of the meeting. I get to listen to everybody else. I think that recovery is diverse and I think we all have a lot of commonalities when it comes to recovery, but we all do things a little bit different. So it makes perfect sense that our 10 steps will be a little different. So I'm looking forward to hearing from you guys and learning a little bit about what you guys do to maintain your sobriety. So I know that when I first heard the 10th step, the first things that kind of jumped into my mind was, okay, I'm hearing about a personal inventory. That sounded like a lot, fourth step-ish. And then, of course, when we were wrong, promptly admitted it. I heard some 9th step in that. So, right away, I was thinking 4th and 9th step. But my perspective on the 10th step is even broader than that. I sort of believe that when I think about working a 10th step and trying to maintain my sobriety, it really incorporates all 9 of the prior steps and all the spiritual principles, all the tricks that I've learned, all those things. The 10th step for me is how I bring those all into action and how I try to incorporate them into my daily living. So I think before I can tell you why the 10th step is so important, I'm going to take it just a second and speak very briefly to how I work through the steps, so you learn a little bit about me. And that is, can everybody hear me?
Station there.
What?
Oh,
I'm
okay.
muting people. Go ahead.
Thank you. Thanks. Little bit about me. I started drinking really late. In comparison to a lot of other people, I started drinking when I was about 40 years old and fell into a very binge pattern, but like a really dangerous binge pattern. I drank for only about a 5-year window, but for the last 2 or 3 years, it seemed like every time I picked up a drink, I literally couldn't stop once I started. Literally. I would drink copious amounts of hard alcohol just to pretty much pass out and go into a coma. And I would make sure I had enough alcohol around me just so that when I woke up, I would pour more in me. And I would do this for days on end. And within a couple of days, I'd literally turn into an animal. And I would literally need to be rescued from my own home. And that was by the police department, the EMS, my family would literally have to rescue me from my home. And almost every time that happened, I would find myself either in the emergency room or I would be hospitalized or I found myself in a facility. In 2014, in 2011, something magical happened. I found myself at the Caron Foundation and they started to speak to me in words I had never heard before, in ways I had never experienced. And, they pretty much convinced me that I didn't have a drinking problem, that I had a thinking problem. I had a drinking solution to my thinking problem. And I never heard that before. And they put the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous in my hands, and I opened up the book to the doctor's opinion, and I read about what Dr. Silkworth theorized about alcoholism, and for me, the wires crossed. And I think that I had a very profound step 1, 2, and 3 experience when I was in Caron, probably in my first week or 10 days that I was there. You know, what Dr. Silkworth, what Silkworth explained about the allergy, about the mental obsession made sense to me. It wasn't short. It wasn't long after that, while I was still at Caron. I didn't work the steps perfectly, but I knew enough about the program that I had read ahead, and I knew that quite a bit about the 4-step was about making lists of resentments and fears and sexual harms and harms to others. And although I don't recommend anybody do this, when I was there, I started to make some lists, and I started to get some revelations about what was really going on, and it was really terrifying. I got out of Caron. I remember just before I left, my treatment team really emphasized that, for me to recover, for me to have any real hope of having long-term recovery, I needed to become honest, and I needed to become authentic. Another interesting thing about me, I was a 40-year-old guy at Caron. I was a closeted gay male in a relationship for a long time, and I thought I was keeping all these secrets from people. I wore all these masks, or so I thought, and they pretty much told me that I was a progressed alcoholic, and they didn't give me much hope to stay sober for long unless I embrace authenticity. And I got out of Caron. I got a sponsor right away, and we retraced steps 1, 2, and 3. We worked 4 and 5, and 4 and 5 helped me learn a lot about who I was. And then we talked about 6 and 7, which really was about who I wanted to become, and a roadmap to getting there. We cleaned up, some of the wreckage of my past in 8 and 9, and that brought me to step 10. Right. So I shared all that to bring me to step 10. And I can tell you that my motivation for step 10 was pretty simple. I had an amazing experience. The things that I was asked to do working the first 9 steps were incredibly difficult and challenging sometimes, but every time I did them, there was some magic behind the step, and there was some gift that I wasn't expecting that I got. And my life at that point, I was probably only 6 months sober, but magical things happened. I got these incredible gifts. I guess we could call it a pink cloud. But I was in another world. I like to say that my world pretty much went from black and white to like full color, HD. I didn't understand how relationships could really be, but once I overcame the core of what my disease actually was, or one of the deep roots, which was the idea that if you knew who I really was, you wouldn't like me. Once I started to overcome that a little bit, relationships just bloomed in a way that I never thought was possible. I also had a terrible speech impediment from the time I was about 4 or 5 years old, all the way until I was at Caron, which haunted me throughout school, throughout college, throughout my work life. And once I got more authentic and more right with myself and more in line with reality, some of that tension in my body seemed to lift, and it allowed me to begin to speak more normally. And I can't tell you, what that meant to me. I used to watch people I would watch Christine's mouth move as I grew, and I would wonder what it would be like to actually be able to speak and share something like this. It was a dream for me, and I got that as well. So I had all these magical things happen to me as a result of the first 9 steps. So my motivation for step 10 was really twofold. I wanted to keep the ground I had gained. But more than that, or as much of that, I have a very healthy respect and fear of my disease. I'm the kind of alcoholic that a relapse is not it's not a blip. I mean, when I've drank before, it becomes a life-threatening, situation. I've suffered DTs in alcoholism. I've suffered auditory and visual hallucinations. I've had multiple alcoholic seizures. I bit off part of my tongue in a seizure. So I fear. I have a healthy respect for my disease, and I'm a firm believer in that if I want to keep what I've gotten, I've got to keep doing the things that got me there, and that's what I try to do. Which kind of brings me to what does the 10-step look for me? What does it look like for me? first of all, anything I do in regarding a 10 step is with the backdrop that I have to regularly recognize my predicament. I am an alcoholic, and I'm in many cases untreated and without a lot of work, I become powerless over my own thinking, and I get crazy thinking. And I have no doubt that if I was a step away and I was to live life the way I lived it in the past, that there's a very good chance I would fall into old patterns and I could pick up a drink. And for me, there's a good chance picking up a drink, could likely, it could end everything that I have that I value, if not end my life. So it's that serious for me. So I have to recognize also that my recovery is a lifelong commitment. This is not like a short-term deal. This is something that I'm going to have to dig into, and I'm going to have to make a part of my life, and it's going to have to remain a part of my life. And amazingly, I'm okay with that. Back in the day when I was first confronted with being in recovery on a regular basis, it sounded miserable. It sounded like torture. But a lot of us can relate to the fact that a life in recovery can be a good life. It can be a fun life. So recovery is it's not a destination for me. It's a journey. I'm in this long term. I love what somebody shared last. I think one of the last presenters, mentioned something that I hear often, and that is this idea that being in recovery for me is like walking up a down escalator. When I stop doing the work, when I stop pumping my legs or whatever, I get dumped back very, very, very quickly. So, I'm one of those people that's always in need of improvement and renewal, and I need recovery for that. So first and foremost, I have to realize that I'm in this, long term. I thought very early on, when I was taught the 10 step, I was I was extremely structured. It was something I did on a daily basis. And I found something today, which looked very much like what I did on a daily basis. It would be a form of a self-check-in. And these were some of the questions that I saw, which I thought were very applicable and very similar to the ones that I'm sure that I asked myself. And that was I dishonest or resentful today? Did I say or do anything that would warrant an apology? Have I been worrying about yesterday or tomorrow? Did I allow myself to become obsessed about anything? Have I allowed myself to become too hungry, lonely, or tired? Do I suffer from any physical, mental, or spiritual problems? What steps can I take to do better tomorrow? What do I have to be grateful for today? All great questions, and I can benefit from asking myself these questions every day. So that was the type of thing that I did early on in recovery, probably for many years. I would do that almost nightly and stuff. And I'll be honest, as I've gone a little bit, as I've grown in recovery a little bit, I'm not quite as structured as I was with it. I can tell you some of the things that I do that I think are extremely valuable. And one of the first things is, I'm firmly committed to the 12-step fellowship. It's a huge part of my life. I realize I gain so much from it. It allows me something really valuable, and that's to keep it green. I'm of the belief and of the opinion that's often shared that a lot of us have this thing that we call the built-in forgetter, and I can forget how bad it was, which is crazy, but I can. It also allows me to learn on a regular basis and grow. It allows me the ability to do service. So, what a great situation for me to be able to plug into a 12-step fellowship and commit to it for life. And I think as long as I do that, that's a big part of keeping me close to the program and helping me maintain, my sobriety. Another little trick that I learned. I'm a big fan of Kate Appleman. I don't know if I can name drop, but she was my primary therapist. And when I was inpatient, she gave me a book, and it was a book called Trust the Process. And I think the name of the person that wrote the book, I think her name was Linda Gardner. And I think it's called Trust the Process, and the subtitle is How to Enhance Recovery and Prevent Relapse. And I think the philosophy of that book mostly is that just like recovery, relapse, relapse and recovery are both, they're both somewhat predictable and traceable. And if we learn some of our patterns, we can help self-diagnose, and we can, we can do a self-check-in, which can be helpful. And one of the things that I was taught when I was there, one of the program projects I was asked to do was something that they called a relapse waterfall. And the idea behind a relapse waterfall, which I think is a really useful tool for my 10th step, is that I was taught to look back at times that led up to a drinking episode for me and look at the thoughts, feelings, and behaviors that kind of led up to me actually picking up a drink. The idea of a waterfall being that there's a stream or there's a river that leads up to a point where you go off, you go off a deep end. And once you go off that deep end, you're basically, it's almost a point of no return. And I learned that, at that point, when you pick up a drink, your relapse really isn't starting. From my perspective, your relapse has completed. Your relapse started way, way upriver. So one of the things that she had me do was to do this relapse waterfall, which is about the size of 2 or 3 poster boards. It fits on about half of a wall. And it lists the thoughts, feelings, and behaviors that led to situations where I would pick up a drink. And I did it when I was there, and I took it home. And one of the first things that I did when I got home is I put it in my bedroom over my bed. And it's been there for 14 years. And it shows me it gives me a lot of things to think about. There was a point in time where I would look at it every single day. I don't look at it nearly as often as I did back then, but whenever I'm in my bedroom, I'm always taking a peek at it. And I'll be honest with you, right? If there's 10 or 15 things along that stream before I hit that precipice, there's always 2 or 3 things that I'm like, wow, I got some of that going on, or I really need to watch that. And there's times it even gets even a little worse than that. But it's a way that allows me to continue to check in with myself and keep it green. It's an incredible tool, I think. If anybody's interested in the book or is interested in even seeing my relapse waterfall, I'd be happy to take a picture of it, and I could text it to you if you're at all interested. I think it's a great book, and I thank Kate for helping me with that. Another thing they had me do when I was there. Oh,
No, go ahead.
I'm sorry.
No, go ahead, Tom.
Okay. Another thing that I do sometimes, which I think is very valuable, is when I have something I'm particularly struggling with, I use my sober network. I ask for help. I tell them what I'm struggling with. I ask them to help be my eyes and ears, and help me work through some things, to call me out. Very, very helpful. So these are things that I do on a regular basis to stay sober. I'm trying to think of what else I really want to mention to you tonight.
It's 7:56, just FYI.
Oh, there we go. I think probably I'm just gonna leave it there. I think I'm just gonna let you know that I think the 10th step is very important. I've gained a lot of ground as a result of following the instructions and walking the road that people have walked before me, have left clues, and I know what works. Why would I mess with it? Why do I need to reinvent the wheel? And yet, being in the 10th step and trying to live by the spiritual principles also allows me to be open-minded about learning, new things. Recovery is a hoot. It's an absolute hoot. I hear people say sometimes that they're living a life beyond their wildest dreams, and that gets a little much for me. But recovery has given me a really good life. I'm the kind of guy that, besides the fact that it's pretty cool, it's really the only game in town. I mean, for me, the difference between being sober is really the difference between living and dying. And I learned all of these things that I've shared with you tonight from you guys. A lot of it traces back to Caron. A lot of it, traces back to AA. I'm not afraid to go outside the program of AA to experiment with other things. I have a big full basket of recovery tools, and most of them come from AA, but there's a lot of them that come from outside of AA. I'm not afraid to go out and get outside help. I've been in therapy for as long as I've been in recovery. You know, the last thing I'm going to share about that relapse waterfall is, you know, because there are so many things on the waterfall, you know, it reminds me that there's more than just AA and just going to meetings. There's things like, you know, self-care. Am I taking care of myself? Am I getting proper rest? You know, these type of things. So I hope I did the topic justice. I think I was all over the place tonight, but I really appreciate you asking me to participate. I hope somebody got something out of it, and I'm looking forward to hearing what everyone else has to say about the 10 step. So thanks for letting me share.
Thank you, Tom, so much for sharing. I'm going to hit stop recording.